welcome to the 6th episode of Schrodinger's Podcat. Meow, meow, oh my goodness. So yes, okay, hush down, pussies, hush down. Alright, so today, the rest of the panelists for Schrodinger's Podcat have actually abandoned me, so it's just your host, Avens O'Brien, today, and I am joined by two guests. I've got Yaakov Markel, who has been on the show before, and I've also got Carlos Morales. So, say hi, boys.
Hello, boys.
Hi, boys.
And yeah, so today we're doing this a little bit differently than usual, because actually all participants on this call are actually on the West Coast, which is nice for me because we got to do this nice and late. So I'm just gonna feel that this is a much superior episode to some of the other episodes we've had already, just because I'm on my own clock. But I think I want to start with Carlos. How about you tell us a little bit about yourself in case some of our guests don't know who you are. So we'll open with that, if you would like to tell us about you.
Absolutely. So as far as like this anarchist libertarian community, I started kind of jumping into it a couple years back, at least publicly, due to the fact that I am what's called a government whistleblower. I used to work for Child Protective Services as a special investigator. Wrote a book on it called Legally Kidnapped: The Case Against Child Protective Services. From there, started a variety of podcasts, and right now run Think About Now. You can find everything, though, because it's kind of on a lot of different parts of the internet, at carlosmorales.me. And so that'll kind of give you a nice little bio. Sadly, Avens hasn't been on the show yet, but Yaakov has. And yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, ooh, yeah, I get to go on your show next. Woohoo! I think we were going to do that at one point, and then it just didn't happen. So we'll definitely have to make that happen. So I actually, one of the things I really wanted to ask you about is, so for listeners, next week and the week after, I will be at Porcfest, so I'll probably not be on our podcast, but I know that, Carlos, you've been to Porcfest before. I'll say I've been to one Porcfest before, and it was literally 10 years ago, so I have no idea what I'm in for at this point, except that I grew up in New Hampshire. I've never really liked New Hampshire, so this is going to be fun for me. There's going to be a lot of seeing my family and other things in New Hampshire. But tell me what I need to know about Porcfest, Carlos. And you got to rep it well, because Matt Phillips is going to be listening to this, and he's going to hate you if you tell us bad things.
Oh, certainly no bad things. I mean, the first time I went to Porcfest was a number of years ago. I had just actually stopped working for CPS, and suddenly I was, in the middle of the forest, hanging out with a bunch of like-minded individuals, which I'd never really kind of experienced in such a way before, to where you were able to kind of speak your mind and speak ideas and not be afraid of other people kind of listening or intruding, which, by the way, they are going to intrude. But what I found particularly interesting, though, was just the kind of mixture between the visceral and the intellectual colliding as quickly as possible, which is what you want out of any kind of art or festival in general. So you have, wonderful speakers who are speaking about anarchism and a variety of topics, and then you have other acts. I mean, one year I actually got to do a music act at night, and I spoke about the rape epidemic in the morning. So it's that kind of festival, folks. Oh, and then 2 days later, I tried out ecstasy, and then the next day, acid for the first time in my life. So it's a great time for first times, I will say.
Double hitter.
Oh, it was quite a double hitter, I'll tell you that much. Learned a lot about myself, and I think for a lot of people, it becomes their almost kind of like anarchist mecca for them. As individuals who have been to Burning Man, it's not the same thing whatsoever. Whenever someone says it's like libertarian Burning Man, I'm like, no, it's not. But
Burning Man is libertarian Burning Man, damn it.
Yeah. You don't need to separate, But I will say it's a lot of fun. Just bring the DEET. A lot of people end up getting Lyme's disease afterwards because there are so many ticks, and they're predatory, dangerous, mutated ticks from the CIA who were obviously trying to kill everyone slowly through Lyme's disease.
Hey, maybe a weird question. This is a little off topic, I guess, but when you were at Porcfest, and I think you said you went like 4 times, right? Was Cantwell there?
This is post-PC, post-Cantwell. Wait. Well, let's see. I didn't really. God, it must. At this point, it was 4 years ago. Was the first. Yeah, 4 years ago.
Sure,
it was kind of the 4 or 5 years ago was the first time I went, or whatever. So he probably was. He might have been at that one. But why are we talking about him?
I just like to point out that every time someone says his name on air on a decent podcast, someone needs to donate $10 to antiwar.com. Like it's
why? Like
Done.
I moved. I don't even live in New Hampshire anymore. I mean,
So that's like the swear jar.
why are we
It
talking
is,
about
it's the swear
fashion
jar.
stuff?
Like, if you say that man's name on air. Now, granted, well, the other week, Amanda and Lauren and I were on, we did our own, like, girls show of this, and Lauren said that she'd been dating some guy who'd been listening to his podcast, and I happened to say that any man who's listening to his podcast seriously should not have access to your vagina, and so that became, like, the quote of that particular episode. So I guess I have occasionally said his name here, but is a swear jar. I always donate $5 or $10 to antiwar.com for every instance it is said. So yeah, let's just keep that in mind every time we bring him up, Yaakov.
Done. I'll send it to Angela directly.
I do remember. It's funny. My childhood in New Hampshire summers was rife with like mosquitoes and ticks. So I'm certainly aware of that. It's funny because Judd always wears sandals anyway, and so we're like prepping for Porcfest, and he's like, "Oh, I'll just wear my sandals the whole time. I don't even have to I don't have to have a dressy outfit at all, whatever." And I'm like, "I'm wearing fucking knee-high boots," and he's like, "What? Why?" And I'm like, "Because ticks." And so I was explaining to him that when we get off the plane, because we're doing carry-on only, when we get off the plane, I'm going to go to, like, CVS, and I'm just going to buy as much bug spray and sunscreen as I can, because I'm, like, pasty pale Irish chick, and so I need sunscreen, but like, I'm just gonna douse his feet, like, his whole, like, lower body in DEET, like, every day.
Yeah, in California,
how many days, though, are you going in a row?
We arrive, this is crazy. We're doing a red-eye Tuesday night, so we arrive Wednesday morning. We're going to have lunch with my mother, and then we're going to drive up. So we'll be there for Wednesday, the opening festivities, and then Thursday I'm speaking. I think I'm on 2 panels, and I'm giving a speech all in one day. That's super fun. And then Friday... we'll be there Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday we'll be packing up and we'll be spending the day with my family, and then Monday we'll be hanging out in Boston, and then we'll come back on Tuesday. So it's going to be a
perfect amount of time.
It's a fun little adventure. I'll have Wednesday through Saturday with the libertarians, and Wednesday through Sunday with my family, and so between that I'll have done quite enough time with people that I love but sometimes don't like very much.
Yeah, that's fair. I lived with the Free State Project for 2 years, and moved out to California a year and about 3 months ago. And though I do enjoy the Free State Project and its bounty and glory, I have no inkling or desire to go back there anytime soon.
Where in New Hampshire did you live?
Huh?
Where in New Hampshire did you live?
Manchester.
Ah, of course you did. I grew up on the west side.
Nice.
Yaakov, we will eventually incorporate you into this conversation.
Oh, no, I'm enjoying this.
But anyway, so good tips about Porcfest. You got anything else to tell us about Porcfest before we move on to some other topics?
Though you may assume things are not being recorded, they're probably getting recorded by at least someone. So always just keep that in mind slightly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so now, moving on from New Hampshire libertarians, about 7 years ago, I moved out here to Los Angeles. And Carlos, I don't know exactly when you moved to Los Angeles, and we'll get into that.
A year and 3 months.
A year and 3 months ago. Wow.
Just now, yeah.
Wow, okay, so Yaakov has been paying more attention than I have. And then, Yaakov, you are a California native.
I moved to LA about 35 years ago.
Okay, all right. Did you move from another location or your mother's womb?
From my mother's womb.
Okay, so, all right.
And I moved out, but I keep coming back here.
So yeah, I thought it would be interesting because a lot of people give me shit because when I moved from New Hampshire, the Free State, to briefly Boston and then Los Angeles, a lot of people gave me shit for that. They're like, why would you leave the freest state to go to, like, the most, like, taxes statist, state ever? And There's a lot of reasons that I give, but since Yaakov, you live here, you're a committed anarchist, and you haven't left really, and Carlos, you've moved here of your own volition. I would love to hear each of your perspectives, and I'll let Yaakov go first this time about why you like California and the liberty scene here.
One thing that people actually don't realize, and it's very easy for us to get drowned out because, it is considered a very leftist state, and there's a lot of leftism in politics, and it's very high taxes and all that. But the truth of the matter is, we probably have a much larger libertarian community in California than they have in the Free State Project, just in numbers. Sure, we're scattered throughout the entire state, but so is the Free State Project. But in sheer numbers, I think our anarcho-libertarian community out here is bigger. It's true that we're drowned out, and it's true that we have less of a effect politically, but entrepreneurially, just look at Silicon Valley. It's really amazing what's coming out of Silicon Valley in an entrepreneurial anarchist sort of way. Would you agree with that, Carlos?
Probably not. I mean, it depends. So I moved from New Hampshire actually to San Diego for a variety of reasons, and one of them was actually to move away from the political kind of, honestly, because what I found was is if you're not physically free away from, let's say, negative 15-degree temperatures, and just want to get to a place where you actually kind of enjoy living and enjoy different kinds of cultures, moving away from there, from New Hampshire, was honestly beneficial for me in that way, especially finding a music scene and things like that. But as far as the actual amount of anarcho-capitalists and anarcho-libertarians, I think you may be stretching it by saying within Silicon Valley, because within Silicon Valley and a lot of these other areas, you have just because they're rich and they have startups doesn't mean you don't have a vast amount of progressivists who say things like we need to have some kind of living wage because of the coming technocracy, or believe that society should be scientifically managed in some kind of way. I mean, that's a lot of individuals out here.
Well, let me try to rephrase
and there's
that.
nothing more scary to me, honestly, than a technocracy, because that is the cornerstone of what is progressivism, or at least what progressivists wanted from the first place. So
what I mean to say is that I think that Uber has done more for free markets and for libertarianism and for actual liberty in people's lives than the LP has ever done. That's something I've spoken about recently. And the truth of the matter is, in the past 45 years, what has the LP, the national LP, really accomplished as far as liberty that Airbnb hasn't accomplished, or that Uber or Lyft haven't accomplished, in destroying, absolutely decimating government-sponsored transportation cartels or housing cartels, or look at Waze, which has decimated the ticket writing capability of speed traps and highway patrol, right? So that's what I call like entrepreneurial anarchy, creating freedom in our lives through market solutions.
Yeah, so it depends on kind of your purview as far as the cultural milieu. So yes, on an economic basis, they have added more freedom, which then lends itself to more benefits overall for individuals. So you're able to back up your statements. Now, I can't really speak to the benefits of the LP as a whole. The LP has been nice enough to host a couple events that I was involved in, but I'll tell you the amount of bureaucracy and mismanagement of funds that goes on in a lot of Libertarian Party gathering and parties across the country is monumental, as it would be with any political party.
Yeah.
But as far as having philosophical groups, though, who espouse principally just the idea of a specific type of philosophy, of a way of living, of a way of removing yourself from the shackles of government intrusion, I think there is, benefit to having something outside of just a normal fighting against the state, but also fighting against the idea that we need it in some way, psychologically.
Right, but I don't feel like the LP does that. I feel like FEE does that. I feel like the Mises Institute does that. I feel like the LP runs people like Johnson Weld.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can. I will be in complete agreement with you that any kind of political party as a whole has been pretty much a sham. The very fact that it took the particular topic that I discuss a lot is the topic of child protective services, which, I mean, hell, the LP really hasn't even hit throughout its entire history, and there are 400,000 kids in CPS supposed care right now that are being regularly molested and beaten by foster families, things like that, because just they're too afraid to actually touch it. But they'll be hitting on these particular things, like trying to push people like Weld, which is tantamount to absolute insanity. You want to talk about a technocratic, progressive, eugenicist piece of shit. Weld definitely follows suit into there.
Right. So, give me the... give me a foundation for economic education over the LP any day. If you ask me where my money is going to, I'll mention Cantwell's name 10 more times before I give money to the LP. I'd rather give it to anti-war, you know?
Yeah.
Swear jar. I need to make in post, we just need to add a cha-ching every
exactly.
time that his name is said, and in fact we'll replace his name with cha-ching, and that way it'll just be like, this is money going to antiwar.com.
Exactly. In fact, you could possibly have a little message.
Oh my God.
This is money going to antiwar.
There is an interesting thing, though, about being in California that I have found. So I help run a meetup out here that's called Thinking While Drinking, right? Individuals get together, they all have beers, and we pick, a different topic twice a week. And, 60 people will come out for every single one of these twice a week, which is actually great, to have a beer. And all of these, I host, different little gatherings for each one of these, and these people know me more than any other people that I maybe have ever met, because within 2 to 3 hours of talking about any idea, you end up learning about someone if you start really delving into principles rather than just outside topics. And what I kind of figured out, by the end of it, was that no one knows I'm a libertarian. We're talking hundreds of hours of conversations with these people. But what most of them know is that I'm an anarchist. And that has been a rather interesting thing, is that since I've moved to California, at least among the people that I've spoken to, I'm more at ease calling myself an anarchist out here than I am a libertarian. Because when I say the word libertarian, it's amazing. I mean, we're talking normal people from California in your mid-20s who will go like, oh, you mean like the MRA people? Or they'll say Alex Jones. They'll throw out Alex Jones, and normal people know who Alex Jones is, which is nuts to me. And so it's just interesting that the idea of anarchism as a whole somehow is more appetizing to people, especially in kind of the post-Trump world, than even the idea of talking about anarchism. As far as at least being able to sell your idea, I don't think it's a matter of selling out. It's a matter of, all communication is a form of bastardized telepathy, so use the best words that you can in order to be able to, bring out the best message you can. But it is interesting, though, that there is that difference.
I'll agree with you 100% on that, actually. When I tell people I'm a libertarian, like you said, there's sort of this knee-jerk reaction, like libertarianism is Republican light. Whereas if I tell people I'm an anarchist, they're like, yeah, I hate the government, too.
Yeah, libertarianism is Republican light. I mean,
now, yeah,
they can
the LP
keep it.
is.
They can fucking keep it. The LP can keep it. Who cares? What are we losing? We're losing the history of losing elections.
Right.
That's the LP. It's the losers party. It's the yelling guy with an oversized suit.
Yeah. Who's
screaming about the Fed. Which there's benefits to Ron Paul and all. But
Ron Paul did much more running as a Republican than he ever did as a libertarian.
Yes, certainly he did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't see the benefit of even keeping that particular term in the case of I just don't hold anything to be sacred, including words. So after a while, if a particular term has been shat upon enough, why bother trying to clean it off every single time we try to start a new conversation and not just starting with new sheets?
Right.
It's funny because I completely agree with you conceptually, but I have a very pry it from my cold dead hands sort of mentality about the word libertarian, because it's such an essential part of of how I grew up and being proud of what it was as growing up. So you've probably seen posts on Facebook about fuck you for trying to take my word from me, from people who who are saying we need to get these people out of the Libertarian Party, or people who accuse me of being an outsider, which I find really, really funny. But anyway, in general, people accusing me of not being a libertarian, or people then saying, I'm getting rid of the word because it denotes racism or whatever the hell else, and I'm just I'm just this person sitting here going you can't have my fucking word. This word has been with me for my entire life. I am not letting these other fuckers have it. It's my word, and I'm gonna be a thorn in their side as these people go, oh, I'm a libertarian. No, I'm gonna be that asshole. I'm going to be the libertarian that they're constantly having to explain to other people, and hopefully in the opposite direction. I'm hoping that some alt-righter who decides to use the word libertarian having no fucking understanding what it means. I hope that alt-righter is like, oh, I'm a libertarian, and someone goes, well, I've got this friend Avens O'Brien who's like a great libertarian, because that's what I always end up being. I end up being the one libertarian that people like, that are like, that a lot of my friends on the left, or a lot of my friends in general say, like, I don't really like libertarians, but I like you. And so I just kind of like, I hold on to the word, and I want it to be like, I'm the thorn in someone's side, where some alt-righter or some asshole is going like, I'm a libertarian. And they're like, well, you know, Avens O'Brien has like a really great perspective on libertarian. God damn it, why does she keep using my word? It's because it's fucking mine. So there's my rant about it, but that's because I like my word. But you know,
I can see that, and go for it. Hold on to it as much as you want. But honestly, go ahead.
To be perfectly clear, I'm going to say something funny here. I think that I have female privilege in being able to use it, because if one of you guys says you're a libertarian, someone goes like, oh, you're a libertarian, so you're some like racist asshole who believes in like, you know, letting the poor die or whatever.
Which is funny because we're both minorities.
Right. But the fact is, like, as a female, if I say I'm a libertarian, people aren't expecting that to begin with, so they're more apt to be like, wait a minute, like, I thought that libertarianism was all just, like, computer programmer males overweight with like pizza stains on their shirts, like whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and so I would say that my particular ability to use that term and to keep using it has a little bit to do with my female privilege, because no one's expecting someone like me to say that. And so when I get to say it, I get to invoke a different conversation than something that you guys might be able to invoke. So just I'm acknowledging that's a very specific reason that I might be able to do that.
Yeah, and you're absolutely correct, and thank you for acknowledging your privilege here.
Thank you. I do it when I can. You know, I have to check it periodically.
It is interesting. I'm going to tell you a little story real quick. So I was at the Thinking While Drinking thing, and this Taiwanese woman came up to me. She's wearing a suit, and she was a photographer, and she goes, Carlos, I saw... Wait, no, excuse me, I'm not going to do a fucking terrible impersonation quickly.
Come on, give it your best.
So I was like, I went from zero to racist real quick.
Libertarians are racist. So, here comes Carlos giving a Taiwanese impression. Go on, sorry.
But she just goes, hey, I saw your YouTube videos. I was like, how, what? Huh? Because it is kind of weird. A lot of the people that are towards, or people are dealing with child protective services, or coming from the atheism community, that kind of stuff. It's not normal libertarianism stuff. And she was like, yeah, I was watching a That Guy T video. I was like,
oh,
there's
God.
people who watch That Guy T.
Oh, God.
And they're Taiwanese photographers who live in San Diego. And then she goes, and then I saw he was in Acapulco, and then I saw you were at Acapulco, and then I was like, bam, I'm going to click his videos. And I just looked at her, I was like, do you also listen to Molyneux? She goes, yeah, I listen to Molyneux. I was like, we're the weirdest world ever.
Mm-hmm.
It's the weirdest thing where you have, really intense, like, alt-right joking about killing leftists, kind of a thing, which is That Guy T. And then you have Stefan Molyneux, who's just full-on fascist, you know.
Does Molyneux require a $10 donation?
No, he shouldn't, because he's actually prevalent. And he actually has power, right? And so you should point out the people who actually have some kind of power rather than someone like David Duke who has none, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like, it used to be it was cute to just talk about Alex Jones, but then Alex Jones got power and he calls himself a libertarian. That's a little bit of an issue, right? And so we all get coded underneath this kind of veneer, and it was like, oh, and Carlos, you're kind of attached to those ideas as well. Now, you can make the argument to stay in there and fight, and I believe that there always should be people that should stand and fight on the weirdest hills ever, because if you lose every single hill, you lose the war. But it's just a matter of tact for me. If I'm going to be saying things as, honestly, as intense as we should abolish child protective services, should I be saying that with the same people who keep talking about how age of consent laws are a bad idea and that feminism is cancer, right? If I'm going to be hitting on these very specific little things, should it be that I'm pushing myself towards with a group who honestly stereotypically has the empathy and social abilities of a concrete wall? Probably not. And it is rather unfortunate that it's gotten here, but libertarians, it's kind of on them. I mean, you built it, you get it. Here you go.
know, let me interrupt for just a second. One of the things that I find very interesting about antiwar.com, actually, and Angela Keaton is they really stay very far away from the libertarian infighting, and therefore they have a lot of credibility on their very specific subject, and they have credibility with the left, with the right, with whoever, anybody who's focused on that subject. So same thing with, for example, CPS, sticking to that particular subject or to atheism and not getting involved in all of the nonsense with the various libertarian infighting. It's a good way to retain credibility in those subjects and not push away an audience that would otherwise be could otherwise be brought over to a clear and proper way of thinking.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And it's just a matter of which battles you're going to choose to fight, because after a while, we can fall into kind of the leftist way of calling out everybody on a constant basis, call out culture, and there is benefits to even that, to try to create some kind of purity or something along those lines. Just being free with your words and kind of being anarchistic in the way that you choose to speak can have its own benefits. I think individuals can learn quite a bit from psychology and sales in general when talking about these particular topics.
Carlos, you have other interests besides anarchism and libertarianism and all this kind of stuff. You're in a band.
Yes.
Called Skyterra, right?
Yeah, rock band. Boom.
Now, question for you:
Yes.
Are your bandmates libertarians, anarchists, anything like that?
They listen to the podcast.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, they would go under anarchistic. Actually, it's funny the way I met them, and we actually quick plug here about that. We're actually going to be playing Pride pretty soon here in the middle of July in San Diego. 40,000 people are actually coming out to that, so that's pretty exciting. What I did find interesting, though, were there were some individuals who were mad about the fact that we were playing for Pride, right? Because, and not Christians who were mad at us for playing Pride, because they don't really care. It was people who are homosexual who are actually mad that we are playing at a Pride event, as if that was in some way hurting the event as a whole by playing there, because we're not gay.
Libertarian?
Although no one has any idea how many dicks I've sucked. Was this person a libertarian who was yelling at me? Absolutely not, no.
No, were they upset that you're playing at Pride because you're libertarian, or what was their reasoning?
Oh, no, because we're not gay.
Oh, okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, my bandmates do not talk about their political affiliations, pretty much.
But some of your bandmates have some.
On interwebs or anything. Yeah, I have some, which they knew when I came in the band and kind of shook and changed things up a bit. And it was just going to be kind of expected because I came from such a kind of a controversial background. I got to tell you, though, it is quite a fun thing to be able to create such incredibly complex music, and to be able to take out all of my kind of artistic energy on something that really plays a part in people's lives in a different way than simply voice, words that are coming out of my mouth, but creating that full body experience that allows you to, kind of like move through all of existence through really pretty music. So I'm glad to be doing that on top of my normal political rebellion type stuff.
I know you're going to hate me for this, but this is the only way I can ask this question. But and I hate to make the comparison, but would you say that there are any libertarian themes, like, for example, like Rush does in much of their music?
No. All of my favorite song is called "Pray," which has to do with "Please do not pray for me," which they wrote before I got in the band. But I love the kind of ideas on that. So there are statements on that, but overall, I mean, it is a synth-driven post-rock pop band. It's kind of in that kind of Radiohead, Coldplay type thing, nice. Although with better guitar playing.
Yeah, and I've seen your stuff, and I've seen some of it, and it's actually quite fantastic. And you're a fantastic guitar player.
Yeah.
Yeah, he knows.
I've seen a couple of your videos of just you. I have not watched your other stuff.
Fair. Yeah, always plug in, by the way. Yeah, so, and just one quick thing. This took me forever to learn, and it's my advice to people. When someone compliments you, just say thanks. It makes the other person feel good about giving you the compliment. It makes you feel confident in saying it. And if you shit on yourself whenever someone compliments you, it makes them feel stupid and never want to compliment you again.
And it reinforces your own internal negative feelings. So No
It
reason
took me
to do that.
29 years to figure that out.
I think I always just say thanks when people compliment me. I mean, occasionally I'll go into further detail. Like if someone compliments me on something and I'll go, oh, thanks. Like it's like my third time and I'm really excited about it. Thank you so much for acknowledging that. Like, cause I'll do like, let's say public speaking or something and someone will say, oh, wow, you were great. And I'll be like, thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty new to it, but I think I'm doing okay. Like I typically am not, I mean, I guess occasionally I will go the, like, oh, let me like talk myself down a little bit. But for the most part, I've typically been a like a just straight up like thanks person. And I remember one time I was in a bar and I was just sitting at the bar and like waiting for a drink, and some guy sat next to me at the bar and was just ordering his drink, and then he like turned to me and he gave me like a very genuine compliment. It was very just like straight. He was just like, you look like beautiful, like your eyes are gorgeous, whatever. It was funny is because it seemed really like genuine, like it didn't seem like he was just giving me a line. And I just looked at him like straight in the eye and I just said, thank you very much. And then I like turned to the bartender again and he looked at me and he's like, I've never seen a woman take a compliment that well. And I was like, isn't that how normal people like thank you for if you say something? You just said something very sweet to me. You told me that like my eyes were like gorgeous or whatever the fuck you'd said. And he was just like, I just usually girls are like, oh no, whatever, oh my god. Like and so it was an amusing little thing. That happened in 2010. I remember that very well.
It was at 6:49.
I actually remember exactly where it was. I remember it was. It was one of those moments where I realized. He was wearing a red shirt. I could tell you his name, but I'm not going to. I'm dead serious because we ended up talking because of that, and then we ended up having a long conversation about Ender's Game, and then we became friends on Facebook.
And now he's a libertarian.
He's probably a libertarian now. Yeah, he may have been libertarian inclined beforehand, but I tend to just meet people in bars and convince them to be libertarians, but like
how
gently.
do we convince libertarians to just freaking be nice to people? Just be nice to people.
This could be an entire episode on how the fuck do you teach libertarians to be nice to people.
Why is that so hard? Just say hi, smile, be friendly.
Well, there's an assumption among a lot of libertarians, which is fuck your feelings. Emotions don't matter. It's just it's just the argument, right? And so the idea is that your emotions are not my responsibility. Mm-hmm. And though on an objectivist way I can kind of understand that, I don't think it has very much to do with persuasion as a whole. Well, and what is the point of having a discussion? Is it simply to learn, which is great, and there's a going back and forth? Is it to persuade in certain cases? If it's to persuade, then know how to do it.
Right. Well, and I think it's important because the thing is that, yeah, I'm not responsible for someone else's feelings from an objectivist perspective. Yeah, okay, great. But from a transactional, like, I'm literally just going to put this into, like, transactional economic theory for a second. Like, I want something from you. I want you to believe what I believe. I want you to concede my points. I want you to adopt my philosophy. And therefore, in order to get you to do that, I need to convince you. I need to provide you with value. I need to convince you why this car is the best car and you need to get into this car, right? So in that, like, it's funny because yes, if I'm just talking in general, like, I'm not responsible for that guy over there's feelings. But if I want something from that guy, if I want that person to transact with me in some way, whether it's purchasing a car or buying into an idea, I need to sell it. I need to convince him, like, I need to take his emotions into account. I need to take his willingness at that time. Like, I don't sell a car to somebody who doesn't have money, right? Like, in the same way, like, if somebody needs their feelings accommodated, they need their idea, they need to go, oh, but I'm really concerned about this thing. I think the state needs to do this thing. Well, sure, I need to meet you where you are and bring you to where I am. Like, I can't just be like, fuck your feelings, I'm going to sit on my island, and you better want to row to my island. Like, oh, you just, fuck your feelings, and, like, get it, don't, come to my island. Why should I come to your island? Like, I'm not providing any value. Like, yeah, like, why the fuck would you come to my island? I haven't convinced you that my island's better. I haven't convinced you that, like, that there's a reason. Like, and it's so stupid. But I will, to go back for a second, is one of the things for a lot of people who have this whole fuck your feelings mentality is something I like to acknowledge is that a lot of libertarians are fucking geeks. And the thing about, like, a lot of libertarians that I know that were, like, the geeks or the misfit kids or the weirdos or that just they, you know, in some way, like, made fun of by other people, not just for being libertarian, but often for just being weird when they were younger. And what I find is that some people who are made fun of when they're younger become really empathic about, like, you know, trying to be really, like, good towards other people. But, like, if you were, like, the weird kid that got made fun of a lot in school because you were overweight or you really liked, you know, this nerdy thing that nobody else liked or whatever, like, at some point, you, like, if other kids are bullying you or you get teased a lot by society or by whoever you want to be liked by, at some point you kind of become an asshole and you're just like, fuck these people's feelings. Like, I'm an asshole because they're assholes. And that doesn't justify in any way, like, what they then do, which is they go out and just be assholes on behalf of libertarianism. Like, fuck that. But I recognize a lot of times that that's where they come from, and so I'm like, hey, like, I know that, like, a lot of you got picked on as children. I know a lot of you, like, think that these people aren't worth your time. But the fact is, like, you need to try to play nice. You need to learn how to get along with people because we want a world where that's not the case. That you just, like, that's, like, do you want to perpetuate that cycle of shittiness? Like, how about you be nice to people and pay that forward and bring that into the world so that there can be more of that. So I feel like a lot of times I have to acknowledge that, like, somebody's being an asshole because, like, they were molded in the fires of whatever, you know, bullying, shitty, whatever stuff. And sometimes they are just dicks. Like, sometimes people have no justifiable reason from the history for being jerks. But I do like to acknowledge sometimes that, like, and having empathy for jerks and having empathy for them and saying, hey, like, I'm going to have empathy for you. Now you need to have empathy for other people. So, I don't know.
Carlos.
They're also fundamentally wrong about a lot of stuff, and that's a problem too because they're pretty much convinced that they're right. So there's this thing where if you point out the issues with a particular libertarian or, you know, a theory of ideas, you can be lambasted for being either one, you just get called a social justice warrior or something along those lines, or two, you say you are promoting some kind of infighting in general, right? Mm-hmm. And
I used to find that Carlos.
To be kind of, yeah, and I don't believe in unity in any real way. I think, you know, small tribal groups is great, but there's a lot of boredom and lack of thinking. If everyone's agreeing upon certain things, there's a good chance it's not right. And so the points, though, like when you say, like, we're here to show other people that we're right and they're wrong. If libertarians had a better track record on political action as a whole, or on the topic of, hell, you know, maybe a topic like feminism, or the topics of psychology, or let's say things as ridiculous as argumentation ethics, if they had a better track record on some of these things, I think you could give it a little bit more of a push. But until they do, you should probably have a little bit more empathy to recognize the fact that there's a good chance you're going to be wrong. I mean, the problem with being a paragon or excuse me, just propagator for libertarianism as a whole, for me over the course of the last couple of years, is I've tried it. I've had, you know, a podcast where it was, you know, 40 to 60,000 people were listening, and then I started admitting when I was wrong. I admitted that I was wrong about first, second, third, all the waves of feminism, right? And I was wrong about them in ways I didn't realize at the time. I realized that I was wrong on just kind of a multitude of topics when it came to psychology, that, look, I'm pointing out these inconsistencies that I have. I was incorrect about, you know, believing that universally preferred behavior is a very good idea. It's not a very good philosophical position as a whole. So when you say that, though, when you are willing to admit that you're wrong, that means that you have to be able to stand naked by yourself without a tribe around you. Because if you're wrong about specific things but right about other ones, there's less chance of being able to meet someone who's exactly the same. So if you're all convinced that you are right in a very specific way and don't allow any naysayers within it, then you can feel like you're part of a tribe. Well, a lot of these tribes end up becoming incredibly hostile, believing, and they have a kind of a narcissistic echo chamber in which they continually are stating one another is great and that they're right. And whenever they actually run into someone who has a contradictory idea, they've already been told by their small little group of tribal friends so many times that they're right, they're not willing to listen. And people know, they know quick as fuck when it comes off like you're not willing to listen and that you're not there to really have a legitimate conversation.
Speaking to that point, I think all three of us have at least a passing familiarity with psychology. And most of the people that are listening to this are going to be libertarian already. We're not selling to non-libertarians here, but
yeah,
when we're talking to non-libertarians, we're often recommending books about, hey, go read this Murray Rothbard book or Henry Hazlitt or whatever.
Don't ever fucking do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's what I want to ask you, and I'll make a recommendation myself, but I know that you and I think have talked about this, like neurolinguistic programming and psychology and stuff like that before. Could you recommend a book that you think libertarians should read about increasing their empathy and increasing their ability to influence the minds of the people that they're interacting with in a positive way?
Holy crap, that's such a good question that I don't have an answer to.
So I'll give an answer. I'm
going to come back to you, and what I want to do is I want to post like 2 or 3 just links in the show page, because that's such an important question to ask, and it's actually great because it's for people who already are wanting to actually kind of read and learn. So that's fair.
I'll mention
the Bible. The Bible, folks. I'll be reading the Bible.
Well, I'll mention 3. There's obviously How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yep.
There's a teaching seminar by Milton Erickson, which is amazing, and then The Structure of Magic 1 and 2 by John Grinder and Richard Bandler, which is like the seminal work of neurolinguistic programming. So that would be my recommendation to people.
Okay. Well, so I have 2 books off the top of my head that are a little bit different than that. And they're more about self-healing rather than trying to sell other people. So one of them would be The Truth by Neil Strauss. So he wrote The Game, which was a pickup artist manifesto, and The Truth is my favorite, honestly, one of my favorite books of all time. And it's about all of the negative effects after becoming a pickup artist. But what it ends up doing is it's a really naked way of explaining how we go about day-to-day with relationships in our own lives. So I would recommend that book. Another book that I would recommend is The Body Keeps the Score, which has to do with the topic of kind of how we hold trauma in ourselves, and how I essentially acknowledge the fact that the state is unprocessed trauma projected out into humanity as a whole. So if you want to be able to better understand how people think of the government, think about how they understand their relationship with their own parents. Because once you realize the fact that when you're talking to someone about the state, many times you're in fact talking about their mom or their dad, you learn to discuss it in a slightly different way and to honestly empathize with them a little bit more in the same way you're going to have to empathize with yourself, because you're going to have to recognize the fact that there's probably a lot of shit you haven't dealt with yet. And maybe there's a reason why you find yourself, pushing towards some kind of external way to be able to achieve freedom while living kind of a meaningless life, which is... It kind of goes more towards the topics I've been getting into more in my Think About Now podcast, which is about kind of finding meaning in your own life, and how, trying to combat the government seems to be a way for people to feel as if they find some kind of meaning, but in fact they're just kind of perpetuating a loser paradigm.
Right.
Right. Gotcha.
Those both actually sound like very interesting books.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one more book, How to Not Be Wrong. That's like a New York Times kind of pop psychology bullshit book, but I kind of like it. So if you're new to pop psychology and cognitive dissonance and stuff, How to Not Be Wrong is a pretty good book.
Gotcha. I think I have to just recommend the Givens that I feel like lately in the libertarian community there's been kind of a little bit of a lack of understanding of our own history as a libertarian community, and so one of the people that I think that far too few libertarians know about is Nathaniel Branden. And so I would say that a lot of Nathaniel Branden's work, the pillars of self-esteem and his work on that is, not all of it is about convincing other people, though. There's a lot in there about self-esteem and about just self-help that would be very essential to anyone who really wants to learn how to connect with other people, because you're going to have to fix yourself before you try to fix other people. So when it comes to that, I would say I would recommend basically anything that Nathaniel Branden has written. And then it's funny because this came to mind not because it's actually a psychology book. It's actually, I think it's a history book that kind of looks at kind of sociological concepts. But the reason that I thought of it is because like, obviously I was raised by libertarian parents, but my mother is actually like, she studied psychology and sociology, and she taught them in college classrooms. And it's interesting to come from that background of having a mother who is a hardcore libertarian, but also, a sociologist and a psychologist who's talking about these topics and teaching them to college students, and also bringing in her libertarian, flavor to things. But one of the interesting books that she used to have her students read, or she used to refer to a lot, was, for her sociology classes specifically, was a book called The Way We Never Were by Stephanie Kuntz, I think it was. I'm pretty sure that's the name. And what I like about it is it's not a psychological book for figuring out how to convince people. But what it is, was very important to me, is it's a book that really talks historically about what life really was like through like several generations back. And it's one of my favorite books to refer to when people are like idealizing like the Make America Great Again, or the 1950s idyllic like nuclear family or whatever, because that book actually delves into what things were really like during that time period, and how we've come to idealize a time period in history. And I find it a useful book for libertarians, because a lot of times they're idealizing a time period, and then they're becoming, let's say, anti-feminist or whatever else. And if you actually read that book and you learn more about what life was actually like during this said time period, like from like actual history and an actual sociological perspective on it, you can learn a lot about about those topics, and it will further one's understanding on that, which I think will cause them to actually get along better with people, or be able to communicate better with people. But yeah, that's kind of a side tangent, or just a side interest. But I always think of it as a psychological book, just because because of the context in which I read it, which was through my mother's sociology class.
Now, you guys are both transplants. We were kind of touching on this earlier, but interacting with people in Southern California as a libertarian, anything that you can comment on that as being different from where you're coming from, and how people interact on political subjects?
Guns are a no-go here.
That's an interesting
at least, I mean, well, San Diego, at least, and again, this has to do with the small group of people that you end up hanging out with while you're in any given city. I mean, San Diego has a couple million people where I'm living, so I can end up spending time with Navy folks, and they're going to be more into that type of thing. But it's I kind of gear towards. I mean, San Diego, the two biggest sports are brunch and healing yourself, and so there's a lot of kind of like woo-woo spirituality stuff, and there's also a lot of self-help stuff, and so kind of gearing any kind of these messages as a way of being able to find individual sovereignty in yourself that is free away from the coercive nature of the state is actually quite beneficial. It has its own difficulties, but if you're able to wiggle yourself around well enough, afterwards at least you're slightly closer to the truth, towards some kind of authenticity, especially if you actually mean it. And if you mean it and you don't die on weird specific hills of political topics, you can get a lot further as far as at least promoting the idea of a society that is worth living in the future. Because in actuality, the more I think about it, the less I'd want to live in whatever Hans Hermann Hoppe's world would be.
I think that one of the things I've noticed, what's funny is guns were a no-go here until this last election. And now so many of my friends who are hard left, like hardcore, like members of the Democratic Party, or people who think the Democratic Party is not left enough. There's a lot of those. But a lot of my friends, like a lot of my very liberal friends, are suddenly preppers, and it's been really interesting because I get calls from friends because they're like, you go to Burning Man, right? So you're like used to like getting ready for like bad conditions for like a week. Now how do I what kind of things do I need for like if shit hits the fan and and Trump comes for my transgender friends, right?
Yes.
And it's interesting because obviously it's like, okay, like, I don't know that things are going to get that bad. But I appreciate that for the first time ever, they're going, like, shit might go down. Like, how do we protect ourselves from the government? And like, you know, I don't think that's going to last. As soon as they get a Democratic president in office, like, a lot of them are just going to go right back to, everything's just fine. I don't need my gun. But
it's a good shift.
But it's a good shift, and I've seen it. Like, you know, I feel bad for all my friends who are suddenly terrified, right? You know, they're suddenly terrified about what's going to happen to them. Is their marriage going to be dissolved? Are their children going to be taken away from their gay family? Like, are they, you know, they're terrified of things that I don't think are actually that, you know, realistic a concern right this second. But it's interesting because suddenly they're all like, I've been asked by so many of my friends who I would never have touched a gun before. They're like, you know how to shoot, right? Can we go shooting? Is there a place to go shooting here? And I'm like, yeah, I'd love to take you shooting. And then, you know, and it's been interesting because, like, you know, between Trump and the, like, grabbing your pussy comment and stuff like that, suddenly, like, you know, a whole lot of women I know who are very much on the left are suddenly very interested in being able to shoot Donald Trump if he grabs their pussy. And so, like, I don't know, I just said something that's going to get me, like,
swear jar.
No, actually, I was just referring to the fact that never mind, I was just inciting violence. Anyway, against an elected official. I wasn't, actually.
Disclaimer, we are not actually saying that anybody should shoot the president.
We are certainly saying that you should shoot anyone who tries to grab your pussy without your permission, though.
Unless he's the president.
Well, but, okay, so yeah, I mean, there's some kind of benefit to individuals having a negative view towards politicians, right?
Yeah.
But frustration without kind of any backbone is how you get the French Revolution. And France, honestly, although I do enjoy the cheese, isn't necessarily the voluntarist world I'd want, right?
Sure.
So there's two fascinating things that came out of Trump, which was, one, leftists were suddenly like, yeah, fucking, we can't believe democratic processes anymore. We need tyranny. Because that's a lot of times what they end up arguing for after a while. Although it does allow for some kind of conversation, which is great, and the internet is allowing for that conversation to become broader and broader, so it's not just under one specific idea. And then, you know, you have kind of the more Trumpskins, anarcho-capitalists, who is the best thing that could have happened for anarcho-capitalism if it wants to exist in the future, because those people needed to leave. So it worked out. The pseudo-fascists were there. They were hanging out in the background going, oh, well, we just get the right guy. And then they showed up. And now they're in that little world. But honestly, what bothers me with the conversation of politics is that it's not enough for someone to be wrong anymore. They have to be evil.
Right. You
can't just say something that's slightly insensitive. You're racist. And if you're racist, then that creates a demarcation that I no longer need to listen to you.
Right.
I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I interact a lot with the Orthodox Jewish community. And, you know, on the one hand, I have, you know, the people that call me, oh, you're a Zionist shill, and all that kind of nonsense on the anarchist side of things. But then in the Orthodox community, you know, I have people that are, you know, extremely right wing and will tell me, oh, you're anti-Israel and you're a self-hating Jew and that sort of thing. And that's sort of very funny to me because, you know, my experience of Southern California is actually really very right wing and very religious. So my experience of trying to convince people is very different from what both of you have described.
Oh man, but I have met like the classic. I mean the Tumblr university liberal weird boring feminist. I have met like a number of those in actual person, and it is horrifyingly boring and just horrifying in general. So that has been a phenomenon that I've actually experienced of just people who will just, you know, will just throw around the word racist, and they'll throw around the word white supremacist because it wasn't enough for white privilege. Now it's actually white supremacism. I mean, those terms do just get thrown around, and I just hope that by the time they kind of get out of college and everything else, and they're stuck in student debt, it just lowers a little bit. Because it could be, I mean, people from 18 to 22 have always been wrong in a variety of different ways. So, and they've been passionate about how wrong they were. I certainly was. So I'm not too worried about the colleges. I don't think it's too much of a concern as much as other people are trying to make it. All it really does is kind of demonstrate how worthless college is, if anything. It kind of, and it makes people who are actually more worthwhile to not even think of college as a viable path. Yeah. You know, there is that benefit there, but
I definitely
it is. Yeah, it's a different animal out here.
Yeah, I've definitely seen, you know, what's interesting is I've experienced right-wingers here in California, and the right-wingers that I've experienced in California really, one, they seem to think they've got some camaraderie with the libertarians, even when they're in opposition to things that we believe in, but they're just like, oh, we're not Democrats, like, and there's a whole lot of, like, very, like, righteous, like, you know, like, oh, like, we're fighting, like, against a giant here in California, you know, like...
They do tend to be a little more... The right-wingers here tend to be more libertarian than right-wingers in, let's say, Texas.
Yeah, definitely.
Or, anywhere else, really.
And what's interesting is I used to say the same about Democrats in New Hampshire, because back in the day, when I was a kid, a Democrat in New Hampshire still wanted to cut taxes because they knew that, like, that dealing... Like, Democrats in New Hampshire were generally fine with guns and against or in pro cutting taxes, because New Hampshire had no sales, no income tax, and they knew that if they ran on either of those things, they were going to lose. And so it's interesting because I always think of, like, Democrats in New Hampshire as being, like, way more reasonable than Democrats in other states. And I've since looked kind of back at, like, what's going on in New Hampshire lately, and I've seen New Hampshire Democrats getting a little bit more like mainstream national Democrats or federal, like that's less, definitely not appealing. But on the same token, I definitely see right-wing people here in California definitely being more friendly to a lot of different, you know, gay marriage and stuff like that. They're typically a lot more socially like tolerant, at least there. But yes, I've definitely seen like I really hate it when like the hardcore left, like when they've got a couple points that I'm like, oh, like I'd love to talk about, let's say, feminism, or I'd love to talk about these issues, and then I see these college students or these other activists who become like pretty much caricatures of themselves, and I'm like, damn it, you're making it so I can't, like, now people are going to put you as the straw man so that, like, they're not having a reasonable conversation with me anymore. And partially it's because, you know, they're sitting there and calling someone racist for just, it's not enough that, like, we disagree. Now it's like, you're racist, so I can't listen to anything you have to say. Or you know, like, you were an apologist for something, like, therefore I cannot listen to anything you've ever said. And, like, and it's so, like, I've had it happen at one point. Like, I made some offhand comment on Facebook. Oh, I made an offhand comment about the fact that growing up just north of Boston and then moving to Boston, one of the most common phrases that we used to use was fucking retarded, right? And from a politically correct standpoint, that is something you should stop saying, and I've mostly pulled it out of my vocabulary just because I have, like, I've gotten enough kind of social pushback that I'm like, you know what, I don't need to say that word. I can say ridiculous, I can say whatever. But I mentioned on Facebook that somebody at Freedom Fest was accusing me of being a social justice warrior, and I told him he was fucking retarded. And partially the reason I said that was because I wanted to make it really clear that I'm not really, like, a politically correct, like, you know, no, I'm going to tell you that you're being fucking retarded right now. And yes, that was, you know, not okay by some people's standards, but, you know, it's to prove, to make a point, right? And I posted the interaction. I posted the interaction, and literally, like, I had someone was like, I'm going to defriend you, and, like, I can't, you're not a feminist. I'm like, wait, how am I not a feminist because I just said that? Like, what? Like, I get the whole intersectionality thing, but, like, I'm suddenly not, like, I like everything I've ever said about feminism, which you have shared and posted and celebrated, suddenly it's not okay because I used a word to, like, describe to be really ironic about a situation, and suddenly, like, all of it gets thrown away. And I was like, that is, like, that's beyond logic at that point. You're no longer dealing with someone who's like, I want to have a reasonable conversation, come to, like, you know, a peaceful thing that makes everyone, you know, respected and happy and whatever. No, now it's just like vengeance and anger and all sorts of unpleasantries. So, anyway.
Well, at least this has been a nice, logical, friendly conversation. I will say that you are very much not a nice person for having used that word.
Yeah.
But I forgive you.
See, and that's the thing.
So.
I can totally go, okay, like, I'm a shithead for using the term. But that doesn't negate everything I've contributed to something. Like, Jefferson owned slaves, that doesn't negate everything he did, you know, in terms of, like, amazing writing, whatever.
It's
like,
all kind of retarded.
It's all kind of Oh, my goodness. Carlos, are you going to say something?
So the basic premise, though, is that it's enough for someone to be incorrect and actually to not be afraid of being incorrect.
Yeah.
The issue is that when you call someone kind of evil for being incorrect, it actually prevents people from ever wanting to change their minds because they now have a whole system of beliefs based off of specific premises, starting off with the idea that they are an angel that is good and there's others who are evil in some particular way, or that is terms like racist, misogynist, or a whole host of other words that have been called on both sides of the aisle, which generally means you're doing something right. Although sometimes, you know, if you have enough haters, it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, they're just haters. It might mean that you're actually a dick. So there's always that too as well.
It's also, and remember, we also have the alternative, which is if you dare say something remotely conciliatory towards the left, you are straight up a leftist. You know, like, let's not forget that on the other side, besides the racists, like, you leftist, you statist, suddenly like that's been going around quite a lot.
I've been called literally Hitler, so you know, so there's always that too.
My female privilege means they don't call me Hitler.
You don't have a mustache.
Yeah.
And your last name's not Clinton. So.
Anyway, well, yeah, there is that factor. Yes, I guess Clinton has been called that. Anyway, so I think that's a great. I think your final thought there, Carlos, was an excellent end point for this. And thank you for being on the show. I want to take a minute for us each to plug things we're working on, things we're doing, or whatever, places for people to find us online, or just, you know, whatever shout-outs you want to give. So, Carlos, how about you go first as our guest?
Okay, so you can go to carlosmorales.me, and you'll find my band, as well as my solo CD, album project, music stuff, a bunch of cool guitar stuff on there, as well as that book that I wrote, Legally Kidnapped: The Case Against Child Protective Services. I do mean it. If you know anyone who's dealing with Child Protective Services, the book is like $5 or $10, depending on the format that you do, and it has literally saved hundreds of families having their kids taken away. Like, that's the real shit that I actually truly believe in when I talk about my caring of freedom and liberty and all that good fucking jazz. I don't think there's a better way to do it than preventing kids from getting thrown into foster homes. So check out Legally Kidnapped. That's my book. And Think About It Now is my podcast. I have not updated that of content on there. That's backlog. All good stuff on there.
Excellent. Really cool. Yaakov, what have you been up to? What do you want to plug?
Well, I'll plug, you know, my one thing that I'm plugging right now mainly is the fact that we're going to try and get an anarchist, a full-blown Austrian economic anarchist, into the Israeli Knesset very soon. The elections are coming up, and I'll post more on that on my Facebook page, which is just Yaakov Markel. You can find me. But yeah, we think that we have a pretty strong chance of getting a full-blown Austrian economic ANCAP anarchist who's going to donate half of his salary to the Mises Institute and the other half to what is basically now the Israeli Libertarian Party, and not take a penny of government funds, which is, you know, I think we have an amazing chance to actually make this happen, and it's going to be really cool. So that's me. Nice,
badass. Carlos, quick question for you. Does your book come in actual physical copies, and can I get a copy signed if it does?
Yes.
Ooh, great. I'm going to do that then. I like collecting signed books.
I've actually given away several physical copies of your book, Carlos.
Look at that. Yaakov is just handing
thank you, man.
What are you, some kind of, like,
that's my
liberal
thing.
with free stuff? What?
I give free books. I'm, you know, an egalitarian like that.
And then I guess
the good thing is it's not terribly long either. It's about 100 pages. So
cool. I will definitely check it out. I know you've been plugging it a bunch, and I always go, oh yeah, that's Carlos. He wrote the Kidnap of the State book, but I've never actually read the book, so I should really get to it. I should really do that. Like I've listened to enough of your talks about it that I'm like, I know what's in it, but like I should actually read it. But I guess for me, I'm just going to plug the same stuff I plug every time I'm on the show, which is you can find everything that I do on the internet at avens.me, avens.me. I've got links to my YouTube channel where I never post anything, but you should follow it anyway because I actually link to all these podcasts and stuff like that, and including also any of the speeches that I do at conferences and stuff. I keep that all on my YouTube channel. I also... Facebook, always happy to have people following and commenting. There's a lot of shit posting on my Facebook, but it's a blast. I think it's really fun to have everyone interacting there. Besides that, I will be speaking at Porcfest next week. I believe all of my talks are on Thursdays. I think I'm doing a panel on women in the liberty movement because, of course, we got to have one of those. I'm also doing a panel, I believe, on sex work decriminalization, and then I'm also going to be doing a main stage speech on growing up libertarian and how that can impact just the movement in the future. I'm titling it, "You're Not Fucking Us Up," what people who are raising libertarian children should know. So that will be that. And then on top of that, I'm also going to be at Freedom Fest. I will be speaking on a panel on millennials. So yeah, I'm going to be around and doing fun things this summer. So I'm hoping that people check in if they can. And if anyone wants to go to Freedom Fest, I have a $100 off, coupon code thingy, so contact me. Anyway, I guess that's my plug. So anyway, thank you, Carlos, thank you, Yaakov, and we're going to sign this out by meowing again. So thank you so much for episode 6 of Schrodinger's Podcat. Meow.